Hi friends, we will now read one interesting shloka. I will read the shloka, you please read after me. Then I will explain the shloka. Maybe I will explain a little bit of grammar. And then we will wind up repeating the poem. I will read. Pustakeshu cha ya vidya
पुस्तकेषु च या विद्या
Parahaste cha yadhanam
परहस्ते च यद्धनं
Samayetu pariprapte
समये तु परिप्राप्ते
Nasa vidya natadhanam.
न सा विद्या न तद्धनम्.
Okay. So here is again an interesting observation on, say, observation and also a comparing and contrasting knowledge on one side and wealth on the other side. So, pustakeshu cha ya vidya and parahaste cha yadhanam. So the poet is talking about a situation where you have got lot many books, you have got a whole big library, but you have not read them. Maybe you have read and you have forgotten, but then you have not kept them in the mind. All the things may not be, it may not be possible to learn, but at least you have to know something about what is there in them. So the knowledge is there in the books and not in your mind. Then suppose you are also a wealthy man, but you don't have any ready money. Your wealth is so stuck in so many things, you are not able to readily use it. For some reason you are not able to readily use it. It is there stuck somewhere. So that sort of money. So the wealth which is the education or knowledge which is there in books and not in your mind, and money which is not with you readily, which you are not able to make use of readily, if there is an occasion, if there is an immediate occasion, if there is a very demanding occasion where your knowledge is demanded, where your money is demanded, you are deprived of them both because you don't have either money, you don't have knowledge. So that is what it says. So what is the message? The message is the human mind is a great computer. Of course, nowadays there is so much of information in the computer. You may get anything you want from the computer. But at the same time, you should also know where it is available. You should know enough to search for it at least. And then, even wealth, we should have some sort of, readiness. We should readily have some money to be used for any emergent situation. So that is an ordinary, a very normal, useful observation which the poet says. Of course, here we also see one important point which is there in Indian tradition. In Indian tradition, we had the scriptures called Vedas. And these Vedas, which were about 5,000 years old, so these Vedas were transmitted from the teacher to student, from teacher to student, or from the parent to son, parent to child in that manner over thousands of years. But they were never written down. The surprising aspect is they were not written down. They were just recited, the teacher telling the student, teacher telling the student. And same is the case with several shastras, several other branches of knowledge. It may be Tarka, it may be Vyakarana, and of course those were written. But in the case of the sacred books, that is called the Vedas, there was a tradition that they were not written down. They were not supposed to be written down at that time, in those days. Of course, after Max Muller came, I am told Max Muller is the first man who printed the Vedas. At that time, he was the first man who got them printed rather. Till that time, that Shruti tradition was there. It is called Shruti. Shruti means listening. Shravanam. Shravanam means listening. Shruti means something which is heard. Shruti tradition means you learn from your father or teacher, you transmit it to your son or student. So he again transmits it to his son or student. It goes on and on for generations. The exact pronunciation does not change. There should not be any change in pronunciation. The authenticity of the text is so well preserved that there is a particular intonation. That particular intonation is preserved. If he says Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha, so there is some sort of intonation. Sahasra Kshas Sahasrapat, suppose I say. So it has to be told in the same way. It cannot be told in some other manner. Of course, there can be some regional variation. The same mantra which is told in Kashmir may be the intonation may be slightly different, but in any particular region, the intonation is totally uniform. There is absolutely no change. So in that manner, the Shastras were preserved. And Indian history tells of very, very interesting accounts. Because in Indian history we see that lot many invaders came and then they tried to, they physically took charge of the country. For example, the Persian culture, the whole Persian empire and Persian culture was wiped out in about 15 to 20 years. Same thing happened to the culture in Egypt. Egyptian culture was wiped out in about 15-20 years and some other culture was planted there. And in some other countries also it so happened. But in India, it did not happen. Why? So the historians have noted, thus this particular Shruti tradition, it made it possible to survive in spite of onslaughts. There is somebody who is sitting there in a corner, he looks like a dumb person, but he may be a highly knowledgeable person. So a highly knowledgeable person. So in the 10th or 11th centuries when the invaders came and then they burnt several libraries and then say killed a lot many Buddhists, history shows that lot many Buddhist monks, they ran at that time from here to Tibet. They took shelter in Tibet. That's what history shows. But in India, these people, the scholars, they were so scattered. In every village, the scholars were there. They were so scattered that you can't find a person. You can't immediately say whether he is a learned man or otherwise. So these people, they just ran and then took shelter in forests, etc. They just survived in that manner and then preserved this particular tradition. They recreated the Shastras. In fact, even now we find lot many people, hundreds and hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people who recite the whole Veda. Thousands of people even now. And even now you find several people who know Vyakarana by heart. Vyakaranam is grammar. Who know some other, say, logic by heart. Who know some other Shastra by heart. So there are so many people who know the whole Shastras by heart. That was the tradition till recently, till about 15-20 years ago. The scholars, they knew everything. Even now Veda is still taught. Of course, other Shastras, that tradition is slowly weakening. But Vedas, even today, that tradition is going on. So that is how this culture in India could not be wiped out. That is what the people say. So maybe this particular line has something to do with that. Pustakeshu cha ya vidya. Vidya should not be in books, it has to be in the mind. And then parahaste cha yadhanam. And the money which is there in somebody else's hand. In olden days, of course, there were no banks and then there were no other institutions. So that is why money was physically treasured somewhere. So that is why we are referring to that particular situation. Then samayetu pariprapte. So I will just explain the grammar. Pustakeshu cha ya vidya. Ya vidya pustakeshu vartate. That is that knowledge which is there in the books. Pustakeshu is again locative case. Pustakam is book. Pustakeshu means in the books. All knowledge is in the books. Pustakeshu cha ya vidya. That vidya which is there in the books. And of course, I was saying that Vedas were never written down. Vedas, there were no books in olden days. Here, of course, they are referring to other Shastras also. Something like grammar, something like, say, logic, etc. Then, parahaste cha yadhanam. Yat dhanam, that money which is there in somebody else's hands. Parahaste. Para is someone else, not you. Swahaste. Swa is your own self. Para is somebody else. Hasta means hand. Parahaste means someone else's hands. Money is there in someone else's hands. Then samayetu pariprapte. Samaye pariprapte sati. That is, when time comes or when there is a challenging situation, when time demands, when there is a demand on that, nasa vidya na tadhanam. That particular vidya is no longer there with you. It is not at all useful for you. And then na tadhanam. That particular money is not there with you. It is not useful for you. So the basic idea is, knowledge has to be there in your brain. It may be impossible now with so much of knowledge, but whatever knowledge you are, say, focusing on, that particular knowledge has to be in our mind. So that is what the poem says. We will wind up reading the poem again. Pustakeshu cha ya vidya.
Pustakeshu cha ya vidya.
Parahaste cha yadhanam.
Parahaste cha yadhanam.
Samayetu pariprapte.
Samayetu pariprapte.
Nasa vidya natadhanam.
Nasa vidya natadhanam.
Okay, thank you.